Brent rubbed his shoulders. The waiting was horrible. His party had gathered to bring down a mighty foe. They had slain many together before, but this was a new one. The ground rumbled at its approach. They rushed forward and saw their foe. 50 yells replied to their battle cries as numerous weapons were hoisted into the air. Welcome to Mythical Phylogeny Adventures. I'm your guide, Jason. Today, we face down an ally of the Greek gods. Let's see what we can make of these incredible warriors. The Hecantoncheires, or the Centimanes, or the 100-handers, a group of 3 giants, tall enough to touch the sky with their many heads. Cotus, the Furious, Briareus, the Sea-Goat, and Gyges, the Long-Limbed. They are children of Gaia and Uranus, but were imprisoned and later released by their half-brother Zeus to battle in the Titanomachy. Yet, their description is interesting. They are said to have 50 heads and a total of 100 arms, hence the names. They partook in many stories, interactions with heroes and adventurers. Generally, they are good-natured and friendly. And I need to apologize. In all of my prior videos, I have knowingly avoided one topic. It would influence any mythical creature with multiple limbs, wings, legs, arms, and so forth. What is it? Myotomes and dermatomes. And I am betting most of you have never heard of either of those words. A myotome is the muscles which are controlled by nerves, while the dermatome is the skin and which nerves receive input from which areas. Okay, that doesn't sound too complicated. So what is the issue? If you look at this chart, you'll see the numbers C1 through C8, T1 through T12, L1 through L5, and S1 through S5. They are references to the vertebrae and the nerves that open from them. With all but the cervical nerves, the nerve emerges below the vertebrae. With the cervical vertebra, or the neck ones, the first one is above it, and the last one doesn't have a matching vertebra. Thus, the 7 vertebrae and 8 nerves. Then you have 12 thoracic, which is your rib cage and chest. The 5 lumbar, or your low back. And the sacral, or your tailbone and pelvis area. The ascending nerves are those to the dermatomes. They give you touch and proprioception. They go from your skin to your brain. The descending nerves send signals from your brain down to your muscles, and are the nerves for myotomes. All the nerves link up at something called a ganglia. Here is a map of the cervical ganglia, where all the nerves cross, connect, and divide out. Yes, this is actually a simpler picture. It is a bit of a mess. So, how does all of this sort out during development? And I have touched on this a few times. Segmentation genes. This is an oversimplification, but during development, you get dozens of genes released in different parts of the body. Depending on the combined concentrations dictates what that part of the body will grow into. Sorry if that is very complicated. These segments dictate which cells will form the vertebrae and the nerves. Which brings up how to do it with 100 arms. Well, let's look at something like a centipede and a millipede. And guess what? They have a complicated segmentation gene sequence which produces the legs. Oh, but it gets worse. We need multiple heads to form. And there is no clear-cut description of how the 100 arms and 50 heads are organized. So, I need to ask you, what defines a head to the ancient Greeks? Is it just a face? Due to the mass of flesh we are dealing with? Possibly. Faces and heads could just pop out at odd angles from the giant's figure. Or just a lot of heads all in one place and arms below. There is no solid description on where the heads and arms are located. To do this, we are going to really mess up the segmentation genes. We'll need multiple copies for the head genes, and even more for the arms. That would be a complicated mess. Additionally, it is possible that many embryos are fused together. Potentially, either works. Trying to coordinate 50 brains would be a mess, even if we link every one of them into a massive nerve network. This could be the result of only a single set of brain genes expressed, but less with fusion of the embryos. But that isn't what happens. Each head can think for itself. Now we need to get back to organizing the myotomes and dermatomes. If we had multiple brains, we'd end up with multiple personalities vying for control, and each only having access to a limited part of the body. Potentially, with multiple brains, each head would control 2 arms, but we need nerve feedback, and if each head has its own myotomes and dermatome systems, they wouldn't coordinate. And the 100 Henders were impressive combatants, and that will require controlled movements and a group consensus. Something with multiple personalities would be impossible. This is why I am leaning to only one head having the brain. Ideally, we want all the dermatomes and myotomes going to a single point. That would allow for effective movements needed for combat. But some sources do say that each head has its own personality, which would lead us back to each head having its own brain, thus needing oxygen and blood flow. So, they will need to talk and converse, pass information around. If they shared a form of telepathy by linking the 50 brains together, it would simplify it. But they do talk, and each head will need its own lungs to force the air through. Now, you may be thinking that the lungs are controlled by the thoracic nerves, but they aren't. Your internal organs are controlled by the vagus cranial nerve from the brain. So each head will need to link to its own lung system. Now the heart is an issue. The brain needs about 20% of the blood with each heartbeat. It is feasible to support more than one head with conjoined twins, but at 50, we are going to have some issues. The oxygen and nutrient demand would be too excessive, and the brains would run the risk of hypoxia or low blood oxygen. And for the brains, that could lead to death. If they start dying off, they could rot. In concept, this would be similar to an arterial ulcer, which can end up forming rotting flesh. And with so much tissue, that would mean death. Even with just one brain, getting blood to all the arms will require a much stronger heart and lungs. But we already talked about each head having its own lungs, so a heart for each would be likely as well. Oh, and we still need to figure out all the muscles for all 100 arms. You'll need room for the muscles to go, but due to the sheer number of them, it creates limits. It will be incredibly difficult to arrange them in any way that doesn't get in the way. So possibly, not all of the arms are as large and well formed. Chances are there will be smaller ones, which have less developed musculature, than the larger arms with better muscle arrangement. With the extra weight of all the arms and heads, we'll need to improve the legs, bulk them up for support of the weight. So, in simplest terms, each head has a neck with the correct nerves to control its own arms, and the cranial nerves for the individual heart and lungs. They would each have a limited amount of feeling through the body. I told you, this one is a mess biologically speaking. So, were the 100 Henders a worthy ally to Zeus in his battle against the Titans? There are plenty of mentions of there being craftsmen, blacksmiths in particular. Thus, they will be armed. With all their arms, they can wield numerous weapons, halberds, spears, swords, shields, bows, or just throw rocks, all at once. This means it will have a weapon to counter anything you can bring to the fight. Basically, they are a one-man army. They could be armored too. They know how to smith and could easily make their own armor. How it looks might be an issue. They may have to cover some of their arms and heads to fit the armor over them. But remember, this is a giant. That means they are big. And with that size comes incredible strength and reach. Their head touches the sky, but that isn't a good measurement of height. You'll be hard pressed to dodge all of its attacks raining down on you one after another with so many arms. Fighting up close will be difficult. If you do so, you'll need armor, plate being the best, but don't skip chainmail or gambeson. It won't stop the force of the impact, and you'll be sent flying pretty easy though. But the armor is to protect you from the fall. You'll need any advantage that you can get. With all of their eyes and ears, it will see you coming from any angle, except one, below. An attack from below is a weakness that you can exploit, if you can figure out how to do it. You'll need some prep time if you want to try this. They are said to wield incredible strength. Strength so great that they could rival the gods. Slamming their hands into the ground can shake the ground and send shockwaves. That can scatter your forces with a single strike. They are documented throwing boulders. With their strength, each attack can be as damaging as a meteor strike. You'll need to watch out. Now, there isn't much mentioning of them using magic. Little that could be used on the offensive, but at their size, that won't matter. On your end, use whatever spells you can manage. They are of divine origin, and probably resist all magic to some amount, but there are two that may be invaluable. Assuming that they don't have a telepathic link between the 50 brains, then a silent spell to prevent them from talking to each other should leave them in disarray. But more valuable would be a confusion spell. Something that may make them attack each other. With 50 minds all fighting each other, they could easily cause grave wounds to each other. A battle against the 100-handers is going to be difficult. They can watch from all directions, attack in all directions, have strength to rival gods, and aren't mindless beasts. With their intelligence, they can bring both arms and armor to the fight. They are difficult to combat, and well worth a 10 of 10 for difficulty. Their size can work against them, but they have range to counter that. Their only true weakness is to come from below. You'll need aid in this fight. So, you could kill the 100-handers, but I wouldn't. You'll get a large corpse, but ethics do come up if you bring them down. But alive is another story. They aren't evil by nature. No, they'll offer advice and guidance, but what's more, they are blacksmiths, craftsmen. They can forge equipment for you. While not gods of the forge, their equipment isn't far behind. Definitely worth an investment. But could you fight alongside them? Well, you might get in their way. They are all-around, well-rounded fighters through size, strength, vision, and intelligence. Their size means you could get stepped on, but perched on one of their shoulders or heads could offer you a fine position to fight alongside them. So yes, I believe the gods did well to bring them in as allies. With their divine power, they could fight alongside the 100-handers without difficulty, and no risk of being caught in the crossfire of battle. Brent relaxed. That was close. They were so close to rushing into a fight that they would have lost. Oh, they would have lost. They sat down and spoke with the multi-headed giant before them. Each head held its own conversation without difficulty. By sunset, they parted ways, but not empty-handed. The new friend had forged equipment for them and even aided in their hunt. Brent sighed with relief as they made their way home, safe and equipped. A better ending to the day than they could have expected. The 100 Handers are powerful beings. Biologically, a mess to be sure, but outside of that, they are strong and friendly. Beings which you can work with and seek aid from. Truly, they can be an asset to befriend. Thank you for watching, adventurers. Please return next week, where we shall look at the Amazons. Until then, I'll see you on the roads.